Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 90 of the Home Games Podcast. I'm Yazeed, and this is Joseph.
Hello, I'm Joseph, and today is Sunday, September 12th, 2021. Today we have a bunch of, we're kind of knee-deep in the Squish.
We are knee-deep in the Squish.
I've been basically ripping apart our game engine and rewriting it from the beginning, and I have a bunch of changes and realizations and twists and turns along the way we will discuss today.
That's right. I unfortunately had some personal stuff going on and didn't get a chance to work on Home Games, but I did review Joseph's PR, and as per usual, I left it with a sense of awe, confusion, amazement, horror. It's all in there, really.
So basically I have some changes that I made, some kind of draft changes over the past couple weeks, and then Yazeed has some thoughts and observations on that. I have kind of a long list of bullet points. I also have one thing at the end that I forgot to mention before we started recording, but we'll figure it out. The main thing is shapes.
That's right.
So one of the things before that we talked about at this point over a year ago was that the only shapes that we can support rendering on the screen are rectangles, polygons, general polygons, but mostly just squares and rectangles. We didn't have lines, we didn't have circles, and I'm sure there are other shapes. Or is that all shapes?
So like
2D shapes.
A line isn't a shape; it's a line. But then like a circle is a shape. Well, like I guess an ellipse is a shape, and then like there's polygons. So a rectangle is a form of polygon.
Yeah, I guess generally they can be described as geometry. Like it's just geometry on the screen. But I think shapes sounds less scary for people. But whatever, geometry on the screen. So I spent a lot of time before trying to think about how to get a circle on the screen. Just my thing last week I was mentioning, or 2 weeks ago I was mentioning, how do I calculate the radius of a circle with just one number on a 2D plane that can be any kind of aspect ratio x, y. And was overthinking it and kind of just didn't really understand the problem. And then, like you just kind of mentioned, a circle is an ellipse. And an ellipse has an x radius and a y radius to kind of calculate the arc for, the kind of top and fatness of it. And a circle is like a special case of that. So with that in mind, I rewrote the circle stuff and it totally works, kind of. And then I got lines working as well because, that was pretty simple. Since we already have polygons, adding lines was pretty straightforward. Did you have any questions on that before?
I guess the only question I have is how are lines affected by borders and border width?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So one of the things is that typically like in an SVG, which I'll talk about more later, but as an example of kind of vector drawing, you have an XY point and point of a line, but how thick is it? How big is it? What color is it? And other kind of properties. So using the existing game node stuff, I can store and access those values, but the calculation of the width itself, I haven't figured out yet.
I see. That's probably because a line has no width.
Well, yeah, a line in itself has no width. It's just 2 points, really. But if you do like an SVG, then it'll have a default width of like 1 unit. And so we have to define what 1 unit is. Is 1 unit 1% of your width, 1% of your height, 1% of some function of either of those, like whatever. We can talk about that if you want. I haven't figured it out. I was just working on that.
No, that was my only question on there. I was just curious because like functionally, if we gave you the ability to add like width to lines or border width, there's not really much difference between like a line with a big boy width than I should speak into the mic because I'm realizing it's picking it up on yours.
That's fine. Are you saying a line is essentially a rectangle?
Yeah, a line would function similar to a rectangle if we were allowed it to have width. I'm gonna just move this over here. I look at you when I speak. I don't know why.
It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm cool to look at.
That's right. So like if you gave a line like I don't know, width of say like 9, and that's just a rectangle at that point of width 9. And it could be a square depending on how long the line is supposed to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess functionally it would be like it would visually be equivalent, and there would be a different calculation in like the idea of clicking a line versus clicking a polygon. In my head, clicking a line doesn't make any sense because, like you said, it really shouldn't have width. It's really, at least in my head, a representation of just a visual boundary or a visual thing of something, but not a unit in itself.
Yeah.
People can make games, I guess, doing whatever they want, but at least in my head, I don't want to have an on-click listener for a line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only thing I was thinking about was like Line Rider, like the old game, like Line Rider. Because like in theory, like everything you made there was a line, but they all had like a set width. So like maybe we should standardize width.
So
for lines.
Yeah. So like so a line is. So the way we have the actual points, right, are just percentages. So it's just a 2D plane with percentages, but the actual 2D plane is mapped to someone's screen, which could be a widescreen or whatever. So if we kind of took that to width of a line, it's like I was saying before. Is one width unit or one line width unit 1% of the screen width? Is it 1% of the screen height? Is it 1% of, if we calculated some middle point between the two, or some other kind of like scaling unit, or we kind of abstracted it more into something else where we can say, I think an example that we have in the previous version or current version of Squish is our text scaling. So for text scaling, I calculate size, where basically 1 is 1% of the screen. So if you say that your text is size 1, then that means every character is 1% of the width. Kind of a hacky, weird, funky thing, but it's just some version of that. So that calculation is pretty hard because you have to calculate the overall thing. I mean, it's not expensive or whatever. It's just kind of a tricky thing to think about of scaling one character to someone's screen as a percentage or whatever. So we can do something similar for lines. I haven't really given it much thought, but it is something that we need to figure out. It's like what is a width unit? What is a size?
Yeah, the only reason I was asking because like just the theory of what a line is, right? It's like 2 points, like the connection between 2 points, but it has no width to it, and points don't have any width or height to them, right? They're just like a singular point.
Yeah. So
if we don't have like a base explanation for like width or height to them, like size to them, let's use like the word like gravity, right? If they don't have like some weight to them, then it's really hard to know how they interact with the rest of the world.
Yeah, so like, that's what I mean. A line is not normally a thing. It is a visual indicator of something, some relation or some other sort of idea, but not a thing.
Yeah.
And so if we're really just talking about how do we represent that connection, it's really just what interface do people need to make it obvious that 1 is this and 100 is this, like, and it's really how thick is your line, not anything else. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, that was my only question on there then. We just around those things. Cool.
Everything else I think it makes sense, and I'm pretty stoked about geometry. I don't like geometry, but I mean geometry happens. So
geometry does happen. One question that you had previously too was what's the difference between color and fill? Why do we have two properties?
Yeah.
And I realized they're there for a reason. So in a polygon, for example, when you're drawing a polygon, there's a stroke and there's a fill. The stroke is the actual color of the line that you're drawing, and the fill is the color in what's enclosed by the line you just drew. So it's a bad name, but color is stroke and fill is fill.
I see. So color is stroke color, and the fill is the fill color. Okay, that's good to know. I'll add it to my documentation.
Yeah, but I mean,
it's important.
I just realized that yesterday, so it's like I had them both, but I never really gave thought to why.
Yeah, can we rename them?
We could, yeah. Which I guess is kind of my next thing, which is last episode we talked a lot about backwards compatibility and the importance of maintaining it. And I think, okay, so basically, I still believe that we should maintain backwards compatibility always, but we're at a point where no one has been exposed to these tools except for us. So the idea of me providing at this point, ancient version of Squish that even I don't think people should use has no value. There's no reason to do that. We kind of need to say, this is our initial release, and then we're backwards compatible from that initial release, but not like all this dev shit that I wrote, like, I just pushed 6.42 one night and I have to support that forever. So all of that is to say something in response to what you said earlier about backwards compatibility. or something about I'm destroying some part of Squish, but I forget what you said. Oh, renaming color.
Yeah.
Right. So the reason that I was thinking about that is because color exists on everything up to this point. Color is color of text or the color of a stroke or whatever. It has different meanings for different types of nodes, but it's stored as a property in the engine. And so I could say like, no, we cannot change color. Mm-hmm. It'll always be color. We can add there's a word for it, but basically to alias stroke as color. So when someone gives us stroke, we just set color internally.
Yeah.
But no, we can change it. There's no value to maintaining backwards compatibility at this point. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's like from version 1.0.0, we would say like we're gonna maintain it from this point forward.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but like when I'm over here, like I said, rewriting Squisher and kind of fundamentally changing the guts of how all this stuff works and removing some of the really bad like spaghetti hacks that I forgot were there. In that process, I can't keep the spaghetti hacks maintained for literally no one to use. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
So, I guess I had some other kind of thoughts about the way that we release and package Squish now that we are planning on thinking of that. But did you have any comments or whatever on backwards compatibility in general?
It isn't really related to backwards compatibility, but this is one of the questions I came into this with. Right now we have 3 PRs into Squish. Well, we have 2 and a draft, right? I made a draft PR of your code so I could review it.
Right.
But we also have like you had a PR to change Squish, and I based my documentation PR off of that. Mm-hmm. And now you're changing Squish in a 3rd PR.
These changes are months out. These are just like very initial things. That's why I didn't make an actual pull request. I just wanted to send you the new structure because I haven't even begun integrating this with home games yet. Like it's not even close to ready.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I see. So I guess my question is like, should we? Because I already gave the looks good to me on your original PR and then I could merge my documentation in, and then we can maintain the documentation in this new stuff too.
Okay.
Because I imagine things would change just so that we don't have like a weird triple state thing of Squish or quad state thing where there's like the current version and there's 3 different PRs out for it.
Yeah, basically treat my things as whatever after everything else. Because it's not anytime soon. Because like I said, there's a lot of changes and there's a lot of stuff, and I'm basically just at Squish still rebuilding the core parts of it, and then I'm gonna go try to put that into home games and then realize truly how fucked the home games code is and how hard it'll be to untangle all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because currently, for people unaware, the Squisher is essentially the
driver.
See, it's interesting because I'm like building my model of what the Squisher is through this whole process. So I guess, how do you view the Squisher, Yazeed?
To me, it's like the driver, like the like engine that keeps everything going. It's like the thing that it's what allows the front end and the back end to talk to each other, but it's also a set of utilities.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yes. Okay. So that's interesting because that's been the fuzzy part for me too, because there is a networking component at its core of home games. All these things are connected and all this stuff shares a state. The Squisher is the game part. The game session is everything else.
Yeah,
it's the part that really connects the people to the game, that takes that takes their input and maps it to something for the Squisher to use. The Squisher is, like you said, the engine, the guts. I call it the guts, but it's not super technical. But it's the core of everything. But you need something around it to kind of facilitate the connection, really, between someone's browser and the node server.
Yeah.
So yes, I would agree that in its current state, Squisher does both of those, but in a perfect world it should just be the game, just be the game and accepting the things that the game needs to care about. Anything that's networking specific or connection or session specific should be abstracted away from the Squisher, and the Squisher just have to worry about what it cares about. Anyway, the Squisher exists today in home games, the actual repository for home games, which doesn't make any sense because it's part of the engine. It's not like a separate optional piece of making a game. It is critical to a game. It's what ties everything together. So like I'm saying, I think it should just be responsible for those things, and so it should exist in the game engine repository and not even really have to know about Home Games' use of it.
Mm-hmm.
So in a hypothetical situation, someone who's not working on Home Games can use the squisher to squish and unsquish, scale, whatever things.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's what I'm doing, and it's kind of a mess. And like I said, there's still a lot of work to do, but it's going, and I think it'll be better in the end.
Yeah, I mean, what you showed me looked really cool too. So, yeah, I guess that's my only question. Well, my only question coming into this was like, what do so many 3 PRs? It's never happened before.
Yeah. Also, we have that security bot thing that keeps making pull requests to update our dependencies. It's very helpful, but I feel disrespected.
What's security bot?
There's a GitHub, I think it's called Dependabot, for your node dependencies. It'll scan your repository and say, hey, there's a security vulnerability for this.
Oh.
And then it'll automatically update and then make a pull request for you to merge.
Oh.
Which is cool, but like a robot telling you to fix your shit is fucking
embarrassing. Yeah, we're building that with Home Dome.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. But I guess it's a good example. Like Home Dome will likely have to change because of the way it currently works is it's constructing games and doing things the way that it used to be. Everything is kind of going to have to, except for, the game publishing and some things are going to remain the same, but anything that requires a game or squisher or whatever, I'm ripping that shit out and fixing it. So
nice.
It'll be better, but
a lot of stuff is about to be updated then.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it'll be
through a series of months of changes.
Yeah, and it'll be pull requests. It won't be me changing everything in a night and saying, "Hey, Yazeed, FYI, fuck you."
Thank you.
Yeah, so it'll be more of a thing, and you'll get you'll have more of an input on the way things go. I think so, unless I don't like what you say, in which case
we'll go back to Plan A.
Oh, right. Okay. So yeah, one other thing. Well, there's several other things I have on this list, but something that you mentioned over a year ago. It's crazy we've been doing this for such a long time, but over a year ago you said, would we ever want to have layers in the squisher, in like your game tree? Anyway, my answer was no. My answer was, I don't think the idea of layers makes any sense because the way that the game actually works is that you store a tree of nodes and the ordering and layers are implied by the order of the nodes. Having anything else like a Z order property on something would fuck it up. That's still true. However, the idea of a layer as like an interface thing totally makes sense. And so what I said is still true, which is that an actual layer, the ordering of layers is implied in the tree itself, but we can still provide an interface to say something is a layer, and then in the back end we're actually just storing it as a node kind of after the one that you're talking about. So effectively you have layers, but you don't need to worry so much about the implementation. And I think that's like the big thing I've been thinking of over the past week. Is one of my big initial ideas was, I don't like abstraction. I don't like fancy tools. I want people to be able to read this code and understand how it works. And that's true, but I went so hard on that where it's like, you need to be able to fucking read binary format to like understand what's going on. Like, here's a list of numbers and you should read them and understand that that's the color and that's the whatever. And it's, no, you don't. You can build tools that are easy to understand and still relatively close to what they should, you know what I mean? Like the actual core of the idea and whatever. Good code. And not have it be hard to get into or like weird. You don't need to know the implementation from just reading the interface, whatever. Like the interface should abstract you from the actual, that's the whole point. So that's been kind of an interesting thing. So yeah, like I said, I added layers as an interface.
I like how slowly you're rediscovering computer science theory. I don't mean that as a diss. I just think it's funny because like you're like, I want to do this on my own way, and then like just slowly you're like, well, shit, they were right back in school all those years ago.
It's not that. I mean, my whole thing is. My whole thing is just when people write code, it's like if you look for an answer on Stack Overflow, you're gonna get download this library.
Yeah. And
it's like I hate that so much because people just are. There's a utility for everything, and that's really cool and helpful. But at a certain point, there's a gnat. It left. At a certain point, it's just, it feels shitty, I guess, to just be Lego blocking stuff everybody else did for basic things that you can write yourself. And for me, like, this is kind of a toy project for the most part for me. I want to be able to do it like I want it to do. But yeah, I don't know. You need abstraction is my ultimate thing, and it should be easy to get into, but it shouldn't be mindless, I guess.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
What are you looking at?
The gnat flew like right by my face.
Oh.
And I thought I'm making a joke while holding my eye open, but decided against that.
Yeah, it would have been bad for you.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. I feel like I'm just rambling about shit.
No, it's fine.
Do you have anything to add? Spice it up? Throw in a joke about not JavaScript. Throw in a Python zinger. Something.
No, I don't have anything yet. You're good.
All right. But yeah, anyway, added layers. It'll be a nice interface one day.
Oh, sorry. I did have a question. Something on the layers thing. Would we say layers is like a precursor to 3D too? Functionally?
No, because like so layers really is just layers is just an interface, a different interface to what we always had, which is just a tree of nodes.
Right.
So 3D. You were talking about 3D geometry?
Not 3D geometry. I mean, like, okay, so let's say like you gave three, right? Because the way that they work is that you provide it with three roots, right? Right. You provide it with three root nodes.
Okay.
Right. So let's say you have your root node 1, root node 2, root node 3.
You mean one root with one child and then a child below that?
Yeah, and then like your second root has a child in the same spot, and then the third one has a child in the same spot, and like functionally that's 3D. And so if you're making a game that was like first person, and your dude was on the second layer, and he was walking, or they were walking, and they bumped up against that object, and they like, you know, if we added like cross vision, right? If somebody took the time to like do cross vision, they could like look up and see the same thing above them, and it's like functionally it is 3D, because that's what 3D really is. It's just like thin slices of it's like two-dimensional planes laid on top of each other makes it three-dimensional.
But I guess I don't see how that would work. Maybe because you wouldn't stack layers to build 3D. You would have 3D geometry in your layers. So your actual coordinates would be 3 points, an XYZ instead of an XY. Mm-hmm. And then the actual rendering thing on the client would be able to read that and just, you know, render 3D. I'm like very simple about it, but I don't really know how that would work. As opposed to, if I'm understanding correctly, like basically figuring out the integral or whatever of a 3D shape to then layer and layer and build everything. I mean, I guess that could work. It just seems maybe like inefficient because you have you're representing geometry as like a whole layer of game, as opposed to just geometry. So I mean, that's an interesting idea. I don't really know. I mean, I'm just fucking around.
I'm not gonna try, but I think I think you could
probably.
Basically, I think there's a world where you could. It would be crazy, and you would need a lot of time to build basically a set of integrals to work. But I think it functionally would work.
But you would need a client would still need some sort of way to basically view your layers from the side. Yeah. Because like if you go to our layer test that we currently have, that I show in like all the videos that I have, it's using the same node structure. It's just it has a bunch of children. So the thing in the middle of the screen from the top down is basically the tip of the pyramid. If you were to somehow have the idea of a camera that can move in 3 dimensions down to the side, then yeah, that layering thing would work because it would actually be thousands of layers building this geometry in kind of this big contiguous thing. But you would need a 3D engine to move in that space and see it from that way, which is like so far outside of where I'm like what I can do or how my brain can work.
No, I don't think that I wouldn't recommend it, but I think that there is a world where you could do it based on this. I just think you'd have to be a crazy person to do it.
Well, hey, done. Let me go through my notes really quick to make sure I'm not missing stuff. So shapes, ellipses, the big revelation about circle math. Layers, talked about that. Color versus fill. I have this whole thing about dev tools that I'm going to talk about hopefully at the end. So I'm trying to get through everything else first. Fuck backwards compatibility. Okay. So Squish.
Yep.
Will be backwards compatible after a certain cutting point where we say this is version 1.
Mm-hmm.
After that, we have to support every previous version of Squish.
Mm-hmm.
Or, maybe some caveats there, but for the most part, every version of Squish. Every published version. So how do we do that?
That's a really good question. I think sheer effort is the answer to that question.
Well, it's a 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated power of will.
5% pleasure,
50% pain, 100%.
That's right.
So my actual direct question, well, not really a question. I kind of have an answer already, because whatever. I don't know how to do a podcast, but we need to have backwards compatibility for Squish. Mm-hmm. What you can do in NPM is add a dependency of yourself at a different version. Mm-hmm. So Squish can say, I depend on Squish 2, and I depend on Squish 1, and I am publishing and I'm Squish 3. Mm-hmm. The next one can say, I depend on Squish 3, which itself depended on Squish 2, which also depended on Squish 1. So it's kind of like this nesting egg doll, or not like nesting doll thing or whatever, where each version has all the versions before it. So each subsequent or whatever version only needs to depend on the most recent. But that might work now. It feels funny to me, and it's depending on NPM's feature of supporting that. If they stop supporting that one day, we have to figure out something else, and that seems fucked. And I don't like it.
Yeah.
So what I think we should do, tell me if I'm wrong, is basically make a separate Squish package that is just Squish release, which is basically every version of Squish that we support directly listed in its dependencies, all brought in as one dependency that clients can access. It doesn't have any code itself, in the same way that Home Games depends on just Home Games Core and Home Games, or Home Games Web, and brings them both together in like a release.
Interesting.
So if we have a separate thing that just has a package.json with Squish at this version, Squish at this version, what it does is it allows us to bypass our own requirement of backwards compatibility. Because if we ever put out a version that we don't want to support anymore, which is also a thing if we want to deprecate something, fully deprecate something because it's bad for whatever reason, we have the opportunity to say this is no longer in our release. It's out. It's not in our code anymore. Another requirement is that Squish can never have dependencies, because otherwise it'll keep bundling. Like we'll have this big chunk of code that's like added over and over again in different versions to its. I just don't want that. So it should always just be like a pure JavaScript thing. Why?
We can't apply TypeScript to it then.
We can have a separate. So like we just need a way to keep the pure parts pure. Like we can have a separate thing that can wrap it in TypeScript and make it available as whatever, like just the type defs and have everything pulled in as a library or whatever. But the code itself needs to remain, it's like just pure functions and things. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't actually know anything. I'm just spitballing and I say things like they're true.
No, I'm thinking. Okay. Let's make that plan B. Let's make that plan B for now. Because I think we're going to run into a problem where you and I are going to not know what's going on in Squish at some point.
No.
Eventually.
No. If we don't know what's going on in our code base, we have different problems.
Okay.
Yeah.
You think that we're going to remember what's in Squish forever?
I mean, as long as you maintain code, it's your responsibility to like know what the fuck it is.
Okay.
You know?
Well, the reason I was saying that was because TypeScript makes it a little bit easier, because at least, like typing, what does this function take? What does it return? And I mean, yeah, we can build a wrapper, which, like returns functions and explains what they're doing. At that point, though, I feel like we might as well just skip TypeScript, though, and just use like JS doc or something like that on top of it.
I don't actually know. I'm just trying to think of a setup where we can have things that we write and publish and the TypeScript stuff can be separate.
Mm-hmm.
So that basically it's just whatever new version of TypeScript pointing to this potentially old version of Squish. But then I don't know if like each version of Squish having its own thing of TypeScript, because if we're like depending on TypeScript, if they make a breaking change, then all of our shit stops working.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think TypeScript would make a break. Well, I mean, of course they could make a breaking change. I doubt that they would in the near future. If they do make a breaking change, it would be like well in the future, I think. I mean, at its base, TypeScript isn't even that like it is complicated to do, but like it'd be anyway. That's a side issue. The reason because like basically what I'm wondering is if we could bundle it like you're talking about, and then put in TypeScript as like a version of TypeScript on top of everything, because then we could also lock the version of TypeScript. So if they ever bring in a breaking change, it's fine, because it's everything that we're gonna do. If we make it in TypeScript, everything we have depends on it being in TypeScript. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm just like if because every release is like a snapshot of the code. So if we release a certain thing at a certain version, it'll have a certain whatever pinned version of TypeScript in it.
Mm-hmm.
But if the next version of Squish has to depend on that, then we have to have every version of TypeScript at the time of the snapshot.
I think we would, yeah.
Which, fuck that. Like, it becomes so unreasonable. When you have the most recent version of Squish, your dependency is gigantic. Mm-hmm. It has all those other versions of TypeScript. Your next one is going to be all this plus another. The next one's all this plus another. It'll become unmanageable and weird. Like, for example, I'm thinking of the test structure, because we're going to have testing dependencies like, what is it, Jest? Mocha?
We're going to go with Mocha, yeah.
Mocha. These are dependencies. So if we have them in Squish, we have to include, in our dev dependent, whatever, I don't know how anything works, but it's like included with our code that we want to maintain forever, and I don't want to include anything that's not our code.
Mm-hmm.
So for the tests, I want to have a set, like Squish.js tests, which has Mocha, pulls in Squish, runs tests, and it's responsible for running tests with test dependencies. It's not responsible for having Squish code. Squish code is like a pure just code.
Wait. So we would have another
Squish.js tests.
We have Squish.js tests, like another side repo.
Yes,
that just writes unit tests for Squish.
Yeah, it just has Squish.js as a dependency.
Is that better, or is this as opposed to just using what npm does?
Well, no, because I'm saying we're releasing Squish as an npm module. I don't want to include anything else in that release. So I don't want to include test dependencies.
Right.
Unless, does dev dependencies not go into the bundle in the end? I don't actually know.
So dev dependencies don't get bundled in like a production build. So if you put something as a dev dependency, when it gets built, like not in like a dev environment, because you specify like in Webpack you can specify like what environment this build is. If you specify as like a production build, it wouldn't build the dev dependencies.
So TypeScript is a dev dependency then.
Yeah.
So then the build itself would only include
output. Because when you build when you build the production version of it, it doesn't need like all of the TypeScript code. What it does is it takes the TypeScript code and it compresses it into like the JavaScript version, but it maintains the like. Because that's what really the TypeScript is, just like a wrapper around JavaScript. It's during like the Webpack build that all that stuff happens, but it doesn't like send off the JavaScript with all the code for all your dev dependencies.
Okay.
So as long as that's fine, if that was what your plan was, to do like a Webpack build and that gets around it.
Well, I don't know, because Squish is just a bunch of JavaScript functions. I don't know the TypeScript stuff that well or like anything. Mm-hmm. So I was just thinking like just from backwards compatibility standpoint, like we just can't include a bunch of shit in it, or else our code base or our bundle size is gigantic.
The bundled size wouldn't include it
if we had real dependencies, not dev dependencies, right?
That's what we just... Yeah. If they had dev dependencies, then we get around that issue.
Yeah, like if we included, like for example, if we included the WebSocket library as a real dependency, then That would be the problem. Like it would be, we would include
Yeah.
WebSockets and all of its dependencies in every single release and every old version of it. And I just don't want to deal with that kind of shit. But if it's just in the process of the release and not actually in the release, then that totally makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it would be probably take a bit to bundle when we get a bunch of versions, but the bundled version would be around the same size, I assume, because it'd just be generating JavaScript files basically.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I don't know how anything works.
Because the unit tests don't get sent either, because nothing in the code actually calls them.
Oh, because it's not like required in the.
Yeah, because you give it the entry point, and so nothing that right because you don't require TypeScript anywhere, so it doesn't actually get like bundled as part of like Webpack. I don't know if other bundlers do it. I only know about Webpack how it builds.
Yeah, I guess it just feels funny to me to add. Well, because you have to for TypeScript. I don't know. It just feels funny to me to have Webpack for a Node thing, but whatever. I get it. It's just the way it is. But anyway, yeah, I don't know how anything works, but backwards compatibility remains a thing to think about.
A priority. Yeah. I would say let's play around with that and building that bundle and just bundling JavaScript and with given the entry point, and then keeping in TypeScript and
just in the one repo.
Mocha. Yeah, and because then we can keep the unit tests and everything set together. Yeah. That's my preference, is to keep them as one repo, because it's really all that's like what they are.
Sure. Yeah. Whatever. Whatever works. I just don't want shit.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is it allows us to write it in TypeScript, and then what you get out of the bundled version is JavaScript. So you would still get JavaScript out, which would be nice.
Yeah.
And we would be okay. We wouldn't have any problems, I don't think. I don't foresee any problems.
Yeah, I will fuck with that and see how to make that work over the next couple weeks.
Okay.
What else is on my list here? Everything's a mess. Home games code sucks. We talked about that briefly. Yeah, my last thing is dev tools. So that's the stuff I was showing you before we started recording. Basically, this all came from me trying to test my my math and stuff, my scaling math and my shape drawing and all that kind of stuff, to make sure if I say that I put a circle in the center of the screen, make sure that there's a circle in the center of the screen where I think there's going to be. So I needed a way to visually test that, because it's one thing to get it all just working on paper, like your actual math, but there's like, you're basically building a game in your head and you can't see it. And so you make it like a real game, and then that feels funny because you're trying to write a test and you're not trying to make a fake game.
Yeah.
So I started basically working on what is essentially an SVG client. It's like a sessionless client. It's like an actionless client. It's like not at all a client. It's like the simplest version of a client. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because it takes a game at any given point and shows it as a SVG image. It takes the game that you're testing, kind of the state that you've built in this squisher, and shows you what it looks like. So if you say that you have a circle on the screen, yeah, I can tell you that there's a circle on the screen, and you can also open up this file and there's a circle on this fucking screen, you know?
Yeah, buddy.
Which is super helpful, just for me. But I realized, kind of like what I was saying before about how I didn't want to abstract so many things from the actual way that things work. Basically, this is the start of a visual editor for a game node.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of you can take a given state and kind of tweak it and say, well, what if I wanted this square to be here and be this color? You can kind of inline make these changes and then take that and put it into your real game and kind of go back and forth and tweak things. It's kind of a weird half step between just writing code and just doing visual stuff. It's both. If you want to, I mean, you don't have to, whatever, but it was kind of a fun thing to build. And I think reading about how SVG works kind of helped me flesh out the way that shapes in our stuff should work. For example, the way that an ellipse is drawn in SVG is exactly like I said, where it's got a X radius and a Y radius to build those arcs. And if I had just read that like a year ago, it would have been super helpful.
A year ago, you said you didn't want to read anything, so.
I mean, I don't regret not reading anything. It's like my whole thing. If you depend on something, understand it. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, I'm taking this as a reference, but I get why this math works, you know?
Yeah.
Instead of just like, oh, well, that's how they say circles work.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah. Any thoughts on kind of the idea of a visual editor or like a debugging tool or test utilities in general?
Well, I was gonna ask about this actually. I don't know how to phrase this properly. Is there ever a world where we would like leverage that tool of generating SVGs and use it to just generate like the game state? Like
to use it for our renderer?
yeah. So we like render it in SVG format.
I was looking at that for as an alternative because it would be easier for us to use. Like we just give it the instructions itself instead of us implementing the instructions.
Yeah.
But it's slower. It's like significantly slower because it's basically generating an image and painting it to the screen. And an SVG has a DOM. So like if you go into your console or your inspect element, you can see individual components of your SVG, which is like nice for debugging and stuff. But it's expensive, and so it's nice as a debugger. And I guess if we wanted to, we could use this. We can use this for like a replay video. Because if you have a game and you say basically record all the state, so every action results in a new Squish state, which is a new list of values. You can create an SVG from that list of values. And if you're saving every single tick along the way, at the end of a game, you can build a replay video of it, which is pretty fucking cool. You can also do like screenshots, whatever, for it. But the weird thing is you're screenshotting something that doesn't exist on any screen.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You're screenshotting the state of the game. You're not screenshotting anybody's screen because everybody's screen is a different version. What?
I just realized how sick that would be.
What?
Because, like, basically, if you do that, right? Like, if I took a screenshot and it stored what you would see too, I could toggle. Like, if we built the right tools for it, I could toggle whose vision I was following, or like whose view I was looking at, and I could literally see what you saw, and then be like, "Oh, that's why he didn't do X, Y, and Z." Is like imagine like imagine like an RTS game where like I did action A and you didn't counter with response B.
Yeah.
You did something else, and I could toggle your vision to see why you didn't, and then I'd know what you did wrong, and then I'd be like, I just need to make this part of like my macro strategy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, you could. It's like you would have everybody's perspective, and you would also have like the guest perspective, and you would have you would have everything saved. You can always go back and do that stuff. But the weird thing is that there's a separation between what the game is and what the game looks like. Because on your phone, if you're playing on a phone, your thing looks like this, and it might scale different for you. The image might be scaled like this. The same state looks like this. For me, it looks like this. So if I say take a screenshot, it's not a screenshot. It's a mechanism for some other thing to act as a client and look at it through that client's lens.
Yeah.
So you can say, pretend I was a phone looking at Yazeed's thing. If I was a computer looking at Yazeed's thing. If I was a whatever looking at this thing. Like, I can be different versions of a client looking at the state. It's kind of weird.
Oh, and then it's funny as oh my god, that's actually pretty sick. Because it's funny as like a bug report.
Yes.
And they're like, on my potato, it broke. And we'd be like, all right, let's grab our potato from the pantry. See how this goes.
I mean, we could actually make it so on crash, take Squisher state, export it. This is exactly what your game looked like the second it crashed. And this is how these nodes were interacting, where this thing was. At a certain point, you can have all the, the kind of what was listening to what and kind of more advanced stuff. But like, this is what it was. And then if you have something crazier where you can kind of encode more of your or I guess just build something where you can recover from state. So it's like, okay, I crashed here, feed it into my game again and see what comes out, because it's like a state machine recovering from a certain point.
Yeah.
Like, fucking nuts.
Oh man, that's pretty lit. That does kind of change us to like an NFA instead of a DFA, but that works because you don't know if whether you recovered or you were in that state from the beginning.
I mean, you could have a flag or whatever, just
We don't want it to. We don't want to know though. Functionally, we would rather it just run normally, like it failed, but we brought it back from the dead basically, and it continued on.
yeah, but yeah.
I mean, like we would need to get an error report, or like somebody would need to get an error report, like the developer or us, so that we know like there's like a bug, right? Because that indicates this is a bug, so we need to fix it. But like the end user doesn't need to know ultimately that happened.
True. Yeah, I don't know, unless it's like an unrecoverable error, but yeah, I don't know.
But if it's an unrecoverable error when they attempt the recovery process, it would fuck up again.
Yeah, but then they would be very much aware that it's fucking up.
Yeah. But that's what like they should. I think it's not like I think they should we should let them know like, hey, something went wrong and we recovered and you're good now. Or we could be like, we tried to recover and it's still very broken, so sorry.
It's very JavaScript. It's like, hey man, something went wrong, but we're cruising. We're fucking trucking along.
Dude, that's the point of JavaScript. It's supposed to be like, I don't know what happened. Half my page didn't load, but the half that did, we're good.
Don't worry, bro. I rendered undefined 6 million times over here for you.
But you got your stuff on the right, and that's what you really wanted. I know that. I know it. And that person's like, how did it know?
Yeah.
But it knew.
Yeah.
It knew all along.
The magic of technology.
The magic of JavaScript in particular.
Yeah.
Nah, Java is like, oh no, you sent the wrong type. I'm dead now. And you're like, can you please recover? And it's like, no, recompile.
Yeah. You're the same dude talking about how TypeScript is going to help everything.
TypeScript doesn't prevent it from breaking, or doesn't cause breakage when you're actually using it.
Yeah.
TypeScript is like, you send in the wrong argument, fool, while during the development process. Send the right argument type. Yeah. Java is like, do that, but also the user inputted the wrong argument type, so now I'm dead. And then you're like, please start again. It's like, sorry. Yeah. Recompile from source, run again. Try again, coward. Yeah.
TypeScript is like, cool, I'm adding 4 and a string. 4 and a string. Doing it again, boss.
4 and a string. You gave me a 4? Where was the string? Error. How dare you?
Yeah. That's, I think, all I have on my notes. It was a very code heavy couple of weeks. And I don't know, like I said, building a better model of how this stuff should work. I think the SVG viewer is helping me just realize what doesn't need to be in the game session and what does need to be in the squisher, which is kind of the whole point of what I'm doing right now, of splitting everything up. So
yeah. It makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Me too.
I guess back to one of my original questions. Are we going to merge in PRs 1 and 2 and then wait for your 3 or no?
Yeah. Pretend like because I didn't even make that pull request.
You said, no. Oh, I did. I need to mark yours as a draft PR so I don't accidentally. But I thought we said originally that the person who made it should merge it in.
Oh.
So I was waiting for you to.
Is it approved already?
I approved it.
Oh, I don't pay attention. Yeah, sure. I'll do that.
I approved it. Thank you.
Yeah.
If you approve yours, then I'll approve mine. There is a merge conflict on package.json and package lock.json.
Oh, whatever. Just check out mainline or whatever it's called. Develop. What's it called? What's our master branch? Master?
I don't think so. I think we changed it to main.
Oh my god. I've had like 3 jobs in the past 3 years, and they all have different names with their master branch, and then I have this, which is master. Anyway.
I don't know. Whatever we do, I feel like we should change it to main, but it's whatever.
Fuck it. Master.
I always like, this is a tangent thing on it, but I wanted to name at work our master branch live, because that's when we deploy to that one, it goes to live. So it's like, I want it to, when you deploy to this, I want you to know this is going to go to see production. Like, people are going to use it.
Yeah.
Because our staging branch is called staging, and our QA branch is called QA, and our develop branch is called develop. So it's like, it makes sense to me that they're just named for what environment they go to.
Right.
But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
I need that kind of fiery passion about what we should name our branches. Come in here and tell me what I should name all my shit.
We don't have any environments. We have branches, and then we have the main branch. Whatever the main branch is, that's what we use. That's what gets deployed. But I think it only gets deployed to whoever uses it for Squish.
Yeah, I don't know how anything works. I just built it.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, we could call it current, because that's what it is. It's like the current, the most up-to-date, LTS. Not LTS, stable. Stable. That's a good name for our master Squish.
We've never had any stable code in our entire history.
True though.
Just the empty repository.
Well, like Node has stable and then it has LTS.
Yeah.
Long-term support.
Yeah, so stable is basically their unstable because LTS is like their super solid.
Yeah, that's
stable.
the one that they're actually supporting and fixing. But yeah, I think maybe we want to do something similar to that. But we don't have an LTS. We have everything is supported permanently.
Well, we have latest and latest stable as downloads for home games, but we don't have a CI thing to actually release those. It's just me running commands whenever I remember to do it.
Yeah.
Which sucks.
Well, I mean, maybe we should name our like head branches as that.
No.
Yeah.
We should do random names for every new feature branch. Just like math.random, and then that's the name. Just numbers is the branch name, and then the other person has to figure out.
Well, math.random gives you
numbers. It's a
float. Well, it gives you a number between 0 and 1. Right. So whatever we get is a horrible decimal.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I'm on branch 0.719.
This is like code obfuscation, but for the developer.
Yeah. To make you feel like your job is hard, so you can kind of get the sense of being valuable.
Yeah. Honestly, if we did that, I would switch to GitHub Desktop instead of using the like command line tool, because with GitHub Desktop, you just like switch me to this branch, because if I have to start typing long numbers, it's not gonna work out. It's like I don't know what a branch we're on. I also don't know if you can put periods in your branch names.
You can, I think you can.
I don't know how that works in Windows.
Fuck Windows. I'm talking. I think.
No, I mean like on the command line prompt for Windows, like when I'm doing like git checkout dot whatever. I don't know if it's like that dot means like this folder or what it does from that point onwards.
Just get a Matt Coward stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah. Just buy something worth like thousands of dollars. Yeah. I probably should though, make development easier.
It's I prefer it, but whatever. I'm not gonna argue about Mac versus Windows, at least not right now.
On the podcast anyway.
Yeah.
We'll beat each other up afterwards.
Yeah, it'll be on camera. We'll fist fight.
I don't have anything else for this thing.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else, but thank you everybody for listening. That's gonna do it for this week. As always, our music is done by our friend Tynan. He is Nytan on Bandcamp. That is Nytan, Nytan. You can find us on Twitter at homegames.io. We have a website, homegames.io. You can send us a message on the contact form to tell us what you like or dislike or whatever about the podcast or anything. That's going to do it. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.